The first question is, and it's for you, Noel. Rebecca mentioned the idea of absorptive capacity, that there actually is a competitive place in essentially being competitive in a cooperative session if you can absorb better. How do we help companies in our industry to absorb information and use it correctly?
All right. First of all, allow me to emphasize the concept of coopetition is simultaneous compete and cooperate together. And in the business literature, many scholars, they study this concept from a resource-based view or a knowledge-based view. In other words, there is a goal that we can have share the resources or to learn, and that's where the absorptive capacity kicks in. So we are not only like really cooperate, we also would like to learn with each other. So helpfully, that helps both rival firms. They not only cooperate, but also compete together. So that's why the learning is one of the very important goals under the coopetition activity. Of course, we would like to have a higher vision that because of this exercise, compete and cooperate and learn from each other, then we will get better together. So I think that's why absorptive capacity in that paper done in Finland, they emphasize, actually they observe the industry in Finland and found absorptive capacity probably is one of the keys you have to pay attention to.
Noel, do you have a comment on how, I think it's almost a question of nimbleness as a benefit in a cooperative venture?
I think all companies have limited resources and limited capacities within an organization, and I think the more that you can cooperate and share, you better leverage those limited resources and continue to learn from each other. I think that adds to the whole. So I think the ability to leverage that knowledge base across companies to learn from one another helps utilize all of the company's resources better.
Joel, and questions are coming in quite quickly. One question that's come up is on an international basis, can we do more in cooperation on that basis? We're mostly discussing within our borders, but is there areas for cooperation? We definitely see them as competitors.
Sure, I think there is room for that. I think that was something, you know, I guess I'll take a step back and say a little bit like Noel. When I received the title of the topic, Coopetition, I thought it was misspelled as well. And then when I started to learn about it, I said, oh, that's Bob. And that's what Bob Morrison was doing. And I think Bob fostered a cooperative effort not only here in the United States and in the North American industry, but I think internationally. And I think that is best demonstrated by the Leman China initiative that he started, and it progresses today. And so I think, personally, I think we can apply this perspective not only as a domestic industry, but also internationally as well. And I think it's to our advantage to do so.
Can I add one more point? Still going back to the absorptive capacity, I really would like to pay my great respect to Professor Morrison. And I read an article that he's talking about lifelong learning. Absorptive capacity actually is a very important topic in inter-organizational learning. So it's not only you, individual, to learn. You also have to help your organization to learn. And that is what we talk about inter-organizational learning. Absorptive capacity is the ability in terms of organizational learning.
Thank you. We had a number of questions for you, Rebecca, on the question of coopetition or cooperation versus collusion, and how do we differentiate between the two?
Okay, these are all, big words. Well, first of all, please do not get confused between cooperation and coopetition, because cooperation probably doesn't really involve competition, that part. But coopetition does involve competition, because we believe in today's world, it's not only cooperate with your value chain, for example, with your suppliers or with your customers, but also with your rivals. This is a very basic concept coming from coopetition. Collusion is like involved or embedded in the coopetition, because do not forget, it doesn't matter how successful the cooperation is, they remain as our competitors as well. So there might be some conflict, there might be some confliction. The beauty of this is how skillful that you operate and that you play around with that cooperation and competition and avoid that collision too much. So I think that is the game that we are playing here.
Thank you. For you, Joel, there's an example and a question here that says, with pseudorabies, cooperation at 90% was good, but until forced until the other 10% were forced, we weren't successful. Are we at that point with PRRS and PED? I guess the question is there forced cooperation as well as a need for regular cooperation?
I would suppose that forced cooperation is that a form of coopetition? I don't know. That's a really great question, and obviously that's one that we as an industry have debated for a long time, and I don't know that I have the answer to that. I don't know that we have the tools today with respect to PRRS to force participation in eradication programs. I do think, though, that we need to continue in the spirit that Bob led in this area, and that was to really foster and encourage the cooperative efforts that are reflected in the SHMP. I don't think anyone has done as much in getting our industry to collaborate on PRRS as much as Bob did, and I think that I personally don't think we're to the point of forcing people to cooperate. But I think we need to continue to pick up the mantle that Bob led and continue to work in that area. And I think that an example of that is a group of us last night, SHMP participants that sat down to discuss a local and regional PRRS concern that we had. And I think that is in the spirit of what Bob was trying to do. And I think that we can continue to add more layers of sharing in the SHMP. For instance, sharing PRRS sequences, better understanding the epidemiology of PRRS movements across the herds that are enrolled, and I think that it's our duty to do that.
Thank you. There's a question for me here that says, is coopetition occurring at the university level between swine departments at schools such as ISU and Minnesota? And perhaps this is for someone else than me. I would say in two parts. I'd first of all say that competition occurs. And I truly hope that there continues to be competition in an academic environment. It sharpens each other just as you and the industry goes. Is there cooperation? Is there transparency of information and discussions on methodologies and approaches to the problems? And I would say that occurs as well. But it is a tension, and I think you as an industry have to keep our feet to the fire to be cooperative and competitive at the same time. And it's two schools that are mentioned here, but an emphasis that we welcome and we want to see the success of schools beyond ISU in Minnesota that are mentioned here to maintain strong veterinary programs and animal science programs in swine. That's me pontificating. Another question is there, and this is one for Noel. Are there critical areas which your company would seek to protect and not share in cooperation, coopetition model? Could you give examples?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, when it comes to things certainly around our personal financial information, our personal business model, our relationships with our customers, we would not share those things. I think that's as I alluded to in the talk, there's certain business philosophies we have, there's certain drivers to our business that are different than other companies, and we're not going to be open and willing to share those to the masses for sure. I don't, you know, in terms of anything from a technical standpoint, anything from a data share standpoint, we're pretty transparent on those things because we do believe that as we compete and as we really increase our absorptive capacity that we get better. But when it comes to personal business relationships, our business model, we would that's where we would draw the line.
This is a broad question, probably for both you, Noel and Joel. It's a question: large farm cooperatives haven't stood the test of time with large-scale pig production and processing in the U.S. Where did the cooperative or co-op approach fail or fall apart in this market? Any comments? Why don't co-ops work?
I used to work for a co-op. I worked for Land O'Lakes for 7 years. I think they're still around. They have $1 billion of revenue or something. You know, I don't know. I think there's certain businesses that they're probably not as successful in from a competitive standpoint, or it's not their core businesses. But there's certain businesses which would be any business that they're core at, that they're good at, that they're competitive at, that they've been very successful. So I think it's, you know, and you could name, well, certainly the company I worked for was not successful in pig production, but didn't have a good business model. They weren't competitive. And so I think where cooperatives work is, you know, as any large business, any large corporation, they determine what their core is, they determine what they're good at, and they are successful.
Can I share a thought on this failure? There's a central issue when you talk about cooperation or coopetition. It's value appropriation. It's how you share the value through this cooperation relationship. Some company probably they have set up a contract, or some even got the confidentiality sign in. But there are examples that either there's the legal issue on the knowledge leaking, or how you are going to share that value created from that relationship. So this is where in the business literature the scholars and researchers would like to put some kind of reminders for companies who are interested in this kind of relationship. So just for your consideration.
A question for you, Rebecca, came up here, and it's a discussion of agriculture in general, in that there are competition. There is competition in the market, and in some cases it's done by essentially criticizing other aspects of the market, whether it be GMOs, whether it be antibiotic resistance, whether it be quality of products. It appears to damage the industry as a whole in some cases to have this occurring. How do we develop a discipline or a cooperation around marketing?
First of all, I have to admit I have no idea virtually no idea at all about agriculture. I would like to learn for the future, but I'm not sure in my current position I'm qualified enough to comment on your industry in terms of the, to help you to be more competitive. However, I probably can share with you in terms of the business concept about what we call competitive advantages. Or in another area is what we call it the cooperative advantages. In fact, in my presentation, it involves two. And you actually work together for either you develop the competitive advantages, which you are doing. If you look at, observe how company communicate and put their poster there, message is there that we are better. We are the only one that you can choose. So that is how you create that competitive advantage. That either you've been very different from your rivals, or you actually can provide a better price than your competitors. That's one area that you actually are doing it to be competitive. The other one I haven't really seen in this, and probably it's difficult, and probably it's because it's still evolving, is that cooperation. I believe it's behind the scene that you do cooperate with each other, but how you can justify that, how you can defend to your company or your boss say, yes, this is very beneficial. I think it's still evolving. I'm not sure, did I answer the question, or is that the question? But honestly, I am not in this industry yet, and just yet. I'm really interested in agriculture. I have shared with Dr. Ding that my next dream about my career is about farming. So maybe next time I can come to you and then collect information. And to be continued, your story will inspire us.
Hey, here's a broad question is, should we be concerned about the ability to profitably sell all the extra pork over the next 5 years, looking at the record slaughter at this point and the increased carcass size? Is it possible cooperation and coopetition can be used in some fashion to help increase U.S. pork exports? Perhaps Noel, first of all.
Should we be concerned? Yeah, if you look at the market today, you should absolutely be concerned and what it looks like for the next 6 months here. I think there's a definite concern in terms of total volume, total supply, what price is. In terms of active cooperatively to sell and market that pork, I think, I think the efforts of some of the trade organizations, NPPC, Pork Board, in and around some of the trade areas that we have, the initiatives there are extremely important. I think the support of those by everybody in the industry is extremely important to market and export that pork. I think how we operate in terms of the product we produce and how we produce it to meet that export demand, I think there's areas of co-opetition or cooperation there to try and maintain access to those markets and continue to be competitive is extremely essential. But yeah, there's a definite risk to our industry with record slaughters, some of the issues that we have in front of us from a trade and an export standpoint, and we should be concerned, and we need to work together in those efforts.
Hey, here's a question for you, Joel, and it's a question about benchmarking, and asking benchmarking can both induce cooperation and induce competition. How do you manage benchmarking among clients and use it towards the betterment of producers?
Sure. No, that's something that we definitely do within our practice and within our business. And we have the same mindset, John, that you just stated, that benchmarking information between apparent competitors is a great way for everyone to improve. You get to see who's setting the standard. I think you have to manage the confidentiality of that information, and but I think it's definitely a tool that, as Noel pointed out in his presentation, that makes us better as an industry. And again, that was something that Dr. Bob Morrison did very well. He was someone that could bring us together to not just benchmark on production, but various other topics. He was able to connect with so many individuals within so many different parts of the industry. And I think, again, that's another one of Bob Morrison's legacies.
A difficult question here, and thanks, Joel, is a question of manpower and the transfer of knowledge between competitors through headhunting and the like. And is this beneficial to an industry to move employees around, or does it cause difficulties? I see a couple nods. Rebecca, do you want to answer that one first?
Yeah, through all your questions really makes me pondering, wandering around, why Professor Morrison would like to bring this idea into your industry. In the current business world, there are two probably very prominent industries actually doing it. One is airlines. You will see a lot of airlines, they are competitive, but they align together. That's why when you are having flights, you always accumulate your points. It doesn't matter which airline, but you belong to that cohort. Another industry really doing it is the telecommunications, and because they have a supply problem, they share a lot of high technologies together. So pondering why Professor Morrison highlight this, and this is what I would like to share with you from my observation as a researcher. I think there's a very unique characteristic in this bunch of people. Is the chemistry. Because when you're doing co-opetition, a key issue behind that is your trust and your commitment. So when you work with another company, how much trust and commitment that you really give into your partner is really important. And I guess, what a shame I couldn't get a chance to have an interview with Professor Morrison. I guess Professor Morrison saw that it's a very special chemistry among you. And if you trust your partner, if you trust your competitor, then there's a huge power behind that co-opetition. But as I mentioned in my presentation, the concept of co-opetition is still evolving in theory and in practice. And then there are some unsuccessful stories which really make people feel frustrated. But my prediction is it probably will create some very inspiring story from you. And I guess that's why Professor Morrison, it's such a visionary, with a lot of great vision. And I guess it's your luck to have him in this industry.
Thanks very much for those comments. We have a number of questions yet, but I'd like to wrap this up and give Dr. Molitor some time to introduce some news from our group. And I'd like to end with this question for each of you. And I want to bring it back to a certain extent to academia and those of us in academia. To a certain extent, what Bob did and what many of us are doing in whether it be absorptive capacity, whether it be discovering new knowledge across industry and across partners in the industry, is that we're a third-party facilitator. We're not invested in hopefully in any of the areas, and we want to support discovery, knowledge, and advancement of the industry. What's a characteristic we should carry in academia to help the industry move forward in co-opetition? And I'll start with you, Noel.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest skill sets that Bob had. It was, he could really challenge you really pointedly to the point that you didn't feel very good about yourself, but then come back at the end and make you feel good about yourself, you know. So I think to continually, a characteristic is to challenge all of us, you know, as you have those interactions, could point out opportunities, point out, because we all live in our own little world. You know, we're in central Iowa and we do what we do every day, and if ability to have somebody come in from the outside and really look and challenge, that's extremely beneficial to a business. And I think when it comes from someone, a lot because of Bob's personality, but when it comes from someone who's not, who's associated with academia, that doesn't have those business interests like you talk about, it can be extremely helpful and extremely beneficial. And I think that's one of the key roles of what he did, as well as what, you know, people within academia can do, is to challenge from a non-biased perspective, for us to continue to improve and continue to examine ourselves and try to get better.
Rebecca?
Right. I'm a person, I hate to apart theory from practice. Probably because of my business background, probably because of my industrial experience. I never thought that you can separate them. Otherwise, well, I'm not that kind of person. I know there's some very good theorists background, but I'm not that kind of person, especially if you deal with business. For me, academia is like your thinking tank. That's how I see it. And all the knowledge, we are like, academia like a knowledge hub. I've been industry, and one of the reasons really frustrated me is because we were so busy with our daily life and deal with our daily problems. We really don't have time to sit down and reflect a lot of things. And this is where academia kicks in. They actually, well, my job now is actually sit there and do the research and do the thinking for you, the practitioners. So we create, I hate this word, theories. It's actually the pattern that when we observe many other companies, which probably you don't have the time or the money to buy that, but we do it for you. So this is how I see facilitation. This is how I see knowledge hub. And this is how I see our value for practitioners.
Thank you. And Joel?
Yeah, John, I think in answer to your question, I would say I think Bob set the great example for how academia should do that. At least I think the folks in our business would echo that. And, you know, Bob was special, and he did a number of things, I think, that set the example. First of all, he came to us, so he didn't stay at the university all the time. He was out in the field. He went to see Noel. He went to Seaboard. He went to Pipestone. He went, you know, most everybody in this room probably had Bob in their office, and so he went to see us. He had credibility because he understood our business. He understood health. He understood the business of swine production, and so he had credibility with us. And then thirdly, he had trust. Everybody trusted Bob. They knew that when you shared with Bob that he was going to use that information to help others without everyone knowing where that information necessarily came from. And so he didn't betray the trust that you had in him, the confidentiality and those kinds of things. And so, you know, and lots of other things. But I think those were the things that I remember about Bob, and what I see as a great example for how the university can continue to interact with the industry.
Quite the challenge, and thank you very much for that. Many of us will take it to heart from each of you. Join me in thanking Joel, Rebecca, and Noel for this opportunity. Thank you very much.